Hi, my name's Natalie Baker, and I'm going to talk to you about tragedy reporting and the ethics behind it. On July 22nd, 1975, Stanley Foreman, a photographer for the Boston Herald, was called to a burning fire. When he got there, he saw a woman and a child on a fire escape, and there was a firefighter trying to save them from the roof. The fire escape ended up breaking, and the woman and the child fell from the fire escape, and as this happened, Stanley Foreman shot 4 photographs of the falling duo. The firefighter, Bob O'Neill, was very emotionally distraught after the event. He believes he could have saved them if there was just a little more time. When Foreman got back to the Boston Herald, he turned in the photos he took. Later that night, when he learned the woman who broke the child's fall had passed away, he didn't think that the paper would publish his photos. It turns out that they did. The Boston Herald posted the first picture of the woman and child falling on the front page on a large tabloid size. That photo and the other photos he took were posted on the third page with an article about the fire. The photo was also sent to 128 U.S. papers and several foreign countries. Here you can see the photo of the couple falling from the fire escape. The toddler is on top, and the woman who broke her fall is on the bottom. This is just seconds after the fire escape had broken. In just as little as 24 hours from the publishing of the photos, Boston citizens were fighting to improve the fire safety. Fire safety groups all around the nation used the photo as credit to improve their safety programs. And the photo ended up winning a Pulitzer Prize, National Press Photographers Association Award, and so many groups around the country honored this photo. The efforts made by the Boston citizens and U.S. citizens after the publishing of these photos were great. However, the real issue here is the debate between sensationalism and news reporting of tragedy. From this story and many others like it, people have raised many questions about the ethics of news reporting and photojournalism regarding tragedy and grief. What are the rights of a victim of a tragedy such as this one? The rules are not set in stone. Journalists do not have set laws. However, many societies and organizations set up codes of ethics to follow. Journalists have to keep in mind the dignity and respect of their victims. They have to use their best judgment, case by case, to decide whether the photo is newsworthy enough and will have enough great impact on its readers over the privacy and the emotions of its victims. I read many articles about many different cases, and most said that unless the journalism is intrusive on grieving, that it is commonly acceptable to photograph tragedy. However, photographers need to keep in mind that victims are often thrust into spotlight, and they may ask you not to use the photos. In this case, you need to respect the victims or the victims' families. Is the exclusive nature in the photos a factor whether to run them? Yes, exclusivity adds to the newsworthiness. It is the journalist's obligation to share important and rare information. However, journalists need to keep a balance of the good of the public and the privacy of the victims. The journalists need to consider the effects of the people reading or seeing their photos. If it's small children that are going to be able to see their tragedy, maybe they should reconsider posting the photo. However, if this is going to be a photo that impacts the people and touches them and causes them to make a change or feel something, the photo is generally accepted. Should the death of the girl have affected the treatment of the photos? Yes, the death of the girl should definitely be taken into consideration when deciding whether to publish the photos or not. On one hand, it is good to portray the tragedy and let the people know the newsworthiness of the situation and what happened. However, I think the story could have been told without the photo. It could have easily been portrayed through the words and descriptions of the journalist. However, you're not sure if the effect of the action taken for safety by the citizens would have been taken if the photo wasn't there. Also, the journalists and the newspapers need to consider how the victims' loved ones will be affected when seeing this photo. Did the newspaper sensationalize the photo by its size or placement? Yes, I believe the answer to this question is clear. The newspaper published this photo in a large size on the very front page. Now, it could be used, the excuse of newsworthiness could be used. However, this shocking photo was put on the front page and seen by everyone to entice readers to buy the newspaper. Is the repair of aging fire escapes a morally justifiable reason for running the photos? Not necessarily. Like I said before, the story could have been told fully and with description without the photos. The story even could have been about how fire safety should be considered without the photos. Instead, though, the rarity and emotional impact to take action can be justified. The photo was very rare and it touched people right away, and within 24 hours they were taking action. It makes me wonder if there was a way of, with words instead of the picture, that could have been used to have the same effect. When the local news story, a fire is absent, what is the ethical reasoning behind the photos? Without the news values of audience and proximity, the ethical reasoning has to be dependent upon the novelty or uniqueness of the story. This freak accident doesn't always happen, and so the journalist or the newspaper could argue that this photo was worth sharing because of its novelty. The impact of this photo clearly took effect on the Boston citizens and the US citizens and other countries around the world. It spread like crazy, and many safety precautions were taken after this photo was published. Also, journalists and newspapers could argue that bad news is always rated higher than good news. Should one person's calamity be a photographer's good fortune? This should never be the case, and photographers who practice ethics and good reasoning will be there to defend themselves for these reasons. The emotional events scar them forever. I read a couple articles on photographers that had published photos of racy events, possibly death or war, and they had gotten criticism for them. However, they said that these photos forever haunted them. And they also shared that they felt like they had an obligation to share these tender and heartfelt and sad moments and share the impact of these moments on the world. And of course, these photographers and journalists did not just publish the photos without thinking twice. They considered the feelings and emotions and the situations involved in the tragedy of these victims. Photographers work in the moment. They don't wait around just to find a sensational project. Oftentimes, they're in a situation and they happen to have their camera and they snap the shot and it's the perfect shot. However, it could be a debatable one. You may believe that journalists are just trying to make money, but from what I've read and what I've seen, these journalists know that they have to follow ethics and they do the best they can for the good of the people. They truly believe these tragic photos that do end up getting published, though some of them, though not always, but most of the time, have a positive or have some kind of impact on the people, and that they feel it is necessary for these photos to be published. Are prizes too important to the profession of journalism? I believe that prizes in the profession of journalism are ethical, as any profession deserves to be awarded for good work. Like I said before, the majority of journalism and newspaper and groups of societies and organizations dealing with this follow the codes of ethics that they set in stone for themselves. And a lot of journalists take pride in considering and caring for their victims and taking and using their photography for the good of the people. Therefore, I believe the prizes for journalism are ethical because most journalists work with good reason. If journalists can just keep in mind the following tips, their decisions will be trusted and honorable. Journalists should show and treat with compassion, care, respect, and dignity for victims and their families during any time of tragedy. They should be sensitive with interviews and photos during tragedy as well. They should know their boundaries. Grieving is something that should be kept private unless done in a public area. They need to balance newsworthiness with sensationalism. And when considering if something is sensationalism or not, they should keep their respect and dignity for the victims and the people involved in the case. Sensationalism is not worth the disrespect in a photo that offends people or that is tragic that should not have been shared. If journalists just follow their codes of ethics, use good reasoning, and consider their victims as humans and real people with feelings and families, they will make the best decisions when it comes to photojournalism.